Good evening. You are listening to WEFT 90.1 FM Champaign, Illinois, streaming online at weft.org. Welcome to CU Progressive News, bringing you the many voices of your community. This show is produced live in the studio of WEFT 90.1 FM at 113 North Market Street in beautiful, vibrant downtown Champaign, Illinois. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent those of WEFT, Prairie Air Incorporated, UCIMC, UPTV, any board of directors or staff of those organizations. This program is a collaborative effort. Please email weft90.1@gmail.com with your program ideas to get information on being trained to be a citizen reporter or to be a WEFT host. We're indebted to WEFT and its members who currently and who have for 35 years provided the infrastructure for independent media. We're indebted to the Public Eye, WRFU, UCIMC, and UPTV for their collaborative efforts. Hello, UPTV viewers and you YouTube viewers. Here are the places and times you can tune in each week to see Progressive News. That's Monday, right now, 6 to 7 p.m. live on WEFT 90.1 FM or streaming online at weft.org. I like to always say that you can catch us through the TuneIn app if you want to download that to your phone or smart device. TUNEIN is the name of the app where you can stream any WEFT show live. We're also replayed at 10 p.m. on UPTV Local Channel 6. We're available by podcast 24/7 through iTunes, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcatcher, as is Disability Beat Radio, which you just heard. That's also available through a podcast, and so is Black Lives Matter, which we're going to hear a snippet of during this hour, and Literary Life by Amy Hassinger. So lots of good available programs through our podcast and more coming. Right, Lainey?
That's right. Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So we're going to set you up so that you can be seen over here. Sit back cozy in with me. So our first story tonight is that WEFT has a new station manager. Welcome, Lainey Emmons.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yes, we're so happy, so happy to have you here in the studio and in WEFT in general.
Thank you.
So I wanted to introduce you to our listeners and to just let them know that WEFT is in good hands, and we are planning on going to another 35 years.
That's my goal.
I know it is. She's WEFT. Lainey is really part of WEFT Vision 2020, our 5-year plan to keep us, to get us from the red to the black, and to provide the infrastructure so that we can be on the air for many years to come. We have committed to being a terrestrial radio station. That means down to earth, not just on the World Wide Web. And we made many other resolutions that involved making sure that we had adequate staff here at the station. Lainey came to us as a volunteer coordinator back in April, I believe.
Yeah, late March, early April.
Mm-hmm. And just last month at the board meeting, got promoted to the station manager. It's interim until our fall. Till in the fall when our fiscal year rolls around and we work on a new budget, which we will be working on as actually tonight because we have a board meeting tonight. So Lainey, tell us a little bit about what brings you to WEFT. What's your interest in community radio?
My interest with community radio is the community. It's the volunteers who make up the community or the organization, and it's also the community that they're supporting. Mm-hmm. I loved music growing up. I loved talk radio. I loved all of these things, but my passion is the people. Mm-hmm. My passion is keeping us an organization and helping all those in it. Mm-hmm. WEFT serves so many different purposes for those in the organization. For some, it's their hobby. For some, it's become their family. It's their friendships. It's their connection to the community, and that's what's important to me to keep this here for them. Mm-hmm. So that's what drives my passion.
There you go. We all have a reason to be at WEFT, and mine is really the public affairs. I really believe in independent media and making sure that we have an outlet for news, and it's so the wide variety that people are here is a challenge for sure.
Yeah, yep.
For sure.
Definitely.
Well, it's really interesting that you came to us through the volunteer coordinator position, and you were so well fitted for that because Lainey has a bubbling personality, in case you can't tell. She's definitely a mediator and a person who can work a room and really relate to people. So
Thank you.
yeah, you have that talent for sure. And I don't think anybody who's worked with you would question that. But tell us what qualifies you to be a station manager. How do you feel like what is your main goal with regard to being the station manager?
Yeah. So my goal of being station manager is doing everything I need to do to keep the station successful. Yes, we need volunteers. Yes, we need money. We need all of these things. We need a functioning building. We need good equipment. But somebody who just has strengths in one of those areas will not keep the station successful. It takes somebody that can cover all of those areas, and I can do that. I do that. I don't just have those skills, but I figure out what I need to do to have those skills. I don't claim to know everything, but I claim to be determined enough to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I don't give up.
Well, we'll give a shout out to Bruce Zimmerman, who is also part of the staff here. He's our operations manager and really helps, and of course is somebody we all rely on to keep the equipment going and the studio going. We rely on volunteers for everything, which is really why it's so important to have a station manager who's strong in volunteer efforts. You're managing 80 volunteers every week.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of work, but I also spend a lot of work with the budget, with you, and with getting other community efforts grown.
Right.
It's
right.
so much.
Well, your number one assignment, as you know, is fundraising.
Yep.
And so let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I came on board as station manager, the goal was to raise $30,000 by end of September, which is the end of our fiscal year.
Yep.
So from our first official conversation about station manager, I had about 3 months to raise $30,000. That's a tall order, but it was a little intimidating, but it wasn't daunting. I was up to the challenge, and I'm fighting every day to reach it. And I'm hopeful.
Right. So we have a model that relies heavily on donors, on fundraising through our Fall Pledge Drive, which is coming up. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we have a Fall Pledge Drive coming up. It starts September 3rd with our kickoff event, Labor of Love, at IMC. There's going to be live music. So it starts that day. We take pledges. It's going to run through September 20th, and we're going to have live music in station every day, some acoustic sets, a few bigger sets in the Great Hall. Really just, show our WEF love, our WEF spirit, and highlight all of the talents within WEF. And then we're going to have WEF Fest as well, but our pledge drive goes until the 20th, trying to get all the pledges in and fulfilled by the end of the fiscal year, which is end of September. And our goal is $20,000 or more, but the goal is 20.
Yep, we can do it. We can do it. We raised $22,000 last pledge drive. We intend to raise $20,000 plus this pledge drive, and just getting everybody pumped up for this idea. And the one thing I love to say about pledge drive is it would be great to have a big grant, a big $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 grant. But the fact of the matter is then you're reliant on the government, on granting agencies.
Right.
And this is much more democratic. So really everybody gives $40, $60, $90, $100. You give $10 a month, whatever. And it's pieced together with the community.
Right.
And what happened was we relied before too heavily on a big grant, and then we didn't pay enough attention to all the other fundraising things that we should and could be doing. And so that's turning around. It's a big ship to turn around, but I feel like we're steering it in the right direction these days.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of improvements, and there's a lot of success coming with us.
Yep, we have the podcast going now. We have Radio Free America, where you can stream any show up to 2 weeks after it's played. So if you miss your favorite show, you can still go listen to it. We have a monthly house concert called Sound House that we have in the works. It's going to be our monthly fundraiser besides our big ones. And we have, like we said, WEF Fest coming up.
Yep.
So we have a lot of excitement, a lot of exciting things. And most importantly, room for more volunteers. So you're working a lot. You were at Quad Day, and you're working a lot with making sure that we have young blood in here.
Yeah.
It's something that's important because people, it's an aging population who listens to radio, but yet if we get more people involved and know that they have listen on demand, just like they do with their other listening options, that they can listen later, they're going to find that they have a connection to the community and get listening on demand. So we just have to educate the younger people about that, and then you can get your own show.
Yep, that's exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
That's something that you can do just everywhere. All right, Lainey, thanks for coming in
Thanks so much for
today.
having me.
Anything else you want to say before we go?
I don't think so.
All
Just
right.
join us for Pledge Drive and West Fest.
All right.
September.
Good. All right, so I'm going to let you go, and we're
All
going to ask
right.
Brian to come back into
All
the
right.
studio, and I'm going to let you know what you're going to be happening on the show today. Want to let you know that the prison phone justice, today Illinois went from the 40th most expensive state to make phone calls from a prison to the top 10 most affordable, thanks to the tireless effort of State Representative Carol Ammons, to Senator Jacqueline Collins for being the state sponsor. It's HB 6200. The Family Connection Bill was signed after passing the House and the Senate with bipartisan support. And as Wanjel Harvey Robinson, a young woman who is a tireless advocate for this bill and who had family members in prison, she says, children shouldn't be told their love is too expensive. There are thousands of Illinois children whose lives will be dramatically improved by the actions today, and on their behalf, I say thank you. And just to remind people of the historical relevance with this to our local community, besides the fact that it's absolutely ridiculous how the charges were structured. We are one of the only counties in the whole country to not have, that's my phone ringing, we're ignoring it, to not have a kickback from the phone companies. So most prison and jail entities take money back from the phone companies, and Champaign County stopped that more than 11, 12, 13, 14 years ago. Hats off to our county board for that and for all the activists, including myself and all the rest of the activists who made that happen. All right, Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Got Brian Dunn here in the studio with me, and we have Saxon Burns at the controls tonight, so thank you both for being here. So last Thursday, the county board passed a 1/4-cent sales tax to go on the November ballot, and to introduce the conversation about that, we're going to play the Black Lives Matter podcast from this week. You're going to hear Kadeem on this podcast.
Welcome to the Black Lives Matter mixtape, revolutionary commentary with a hip-hop soundtrack. This podcast was brought to you by the Black Lives Matter Champaign-Urbana chapter and produced with WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM. I'm Aisha, Black Lives Matter CU organizer, and I'll be introducing a recording from the county board meeting on Tuesday, August 9, 2016. At this meeting, county board members voted on the Facilities Action Plan, a multi-million-dollar jail expansion proposal, to the ballot process. In response to this proposal, Black Lives Matter Champaign-Urbana, as well as Build Programs Not Jails and other concerned citizens, attended the board meeting to talk with the members. Here is organizer Kadeem on the county's supposed facilities improvements.
Although the proposal also mentions maintenance of the nursing home, it is important to remember that this jail construction project is 75% of the entire proposal budget. Make no mistake, this proposal is nothing more than an attempt to sneak a new jail into this county. In the proposal, it states that Group A projects are considered critically important and there are no other feasible alternative solutions. We have seen time and time again the results of incarceration. Broken homes, torn relationships, babies growing up without fathers, mothers, sisters, and brothers. We have seen within the black communities, both locally and nationally, the slaughtering of dreams, both potential and realized. We have no more room for incarceration. We have no more room for despair. We have no more room for jail cells where jobs, schools, and other resources should be. Over the last few decades, much research has been conducted detailing alternatives for incarceration, methods ranging from revolutionary restorative justice to reform and policy. There are several alternatives to incarceration. In fact, mental health services similar to the facility this proposal places in Group C could indeed be seen as an alternative to incarceration. It is clear this county do not concern themselves with alternatives to oppression. In June, this county board listened to several family members of people who have died in the Champaign County Jail, as they mentioned a detox center and a pre-trial program as alternatives to the harshness of incarceration, and neither were mentioned for this new jail project.
That's right.
These people came in and shared their hearts, their tears, and their griefs to this county board, and you all turned your heads to them. The proposal also stated that this jail project would address concerns of both corrections staff and community members. My question is how? How can you meet the concerns of both the oppressed and the oppressor, of both tyranny and resistance, of both the corrupt and repressive government with the cause of liberation from the people? It simply cannot be done. I ask you, what makes you all think we need a new jail? This county jail takes lives. In this county, black people represent 13% of the population, but represent 60% of those in jail. What's more, from July 1st, 2015 to June 2016, 29 deaths were reported to the Illinois Department of Corrections, and Champaign County was second on that list with 3. 45-year-old Toya Frazier found dead December 1st, 2015 in the Champaign County Jail. 59-year-old Paul Clifton found dead on Easter Sunday in the Champaign County Jail. 48-year-old Veronica Hornstead found dead on June 10th in the Champaign County Jail. We do not need a new jail. What we need is justice for the people that have died in the custody of the Champaign County Jail. What we need is the abolishment of jails and prisons in this county, state, nation, and world. What we need is an end to anti-black racism and white supremacy in this county, this state, this nation, and this world. A new jail won't solve the neglect that incarcerated people face in this county. Only the toppling of prisons and jails can do that. I condemn this heinous attempt for a new jail, and I condemn the people who support it, and it will not stand. All power to the people.
All right. So that was Kadeem Fuller with Black Lives Matter. We need to have a period of focusing on decarceration before we sink more money into a jail. He said they're trying to sneak a new jail into the county, and there's people who portraying it as a jail expansion, and there's other people who, the other side, who are for this quarter-cent sales tax, would say it's not an expansion. It's it's a building, but it's not an expansion. There's no more beds coming than going. There's a lot of ways to look at it, and we're going to keep covering it over the next weeks, but I'm going to talk to you tonight about all the moving parts and not come to a definite conclusion about it. I want you to have all the information that you have, because it's bigger than just talking about the quarter-cent sales tax. It's really talking about how we're allocating our money as a county. And so there's a lot of moving pieces with it, because there's a lot of different players, and there's all the services that we aren't getting that could lead to decarceration. So the answer isn't to tie up money for a $19 million building or moving the jail facility without making sure we have decarceration measures fully funded. And I really believe from the bottom of my heart that, that as a nation, we have to own what we've been doing with mass incarceration. We need to educate ourselves about the crime, our own crime as a society of mass incarceration. And we have very little power at national levels, but we have a lot of power at local levels. So we have to take all of this very seriously and figure out where we are allocating our dollars and how this is all going to fit together. I've asked Claudia Lenhoff of yes, Claudia Lenhoff. She's not for the Campaign for Better Healthcare, but she's with Healthcare Consumers. Thank you. And Healthcare Consumers, who many progressives trust, and who is working with the sheriff on this. So we will have her on as soon as possible. She couldn't come tonight. She's in Texas, but very possibly she will be here next week, and we're going to talk about what her role is. So first I want to have you, Claudia actually leads the CRPC, so I'm going to turn it over to Brian here.
CRPC sounds like a great organization. In October of 2015, Champaign County was awarded a Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program planning grant from the U.S. Department of Justice. Planning grant activities are being administered by the Champaign County Sheriff's Office and Rosecranse Champaign-Urbana, formerly Community Elements. The Crisis Response Planning Committee, or CRPC, is a formal planning body comprised of local stakeholders who represent law enforcement, judiciary, service providers, the community, and persons with lived experience and their families, that was formed to guide the process for this 2-year planning grant. During this planning period, we are working to assess the needs of Champaign County as they pertain to persons with mental illness and substance use disorders who come into contact with local law enforcement and the Champaign County. So that's what the CRPC is doing. The CRPC believes that community input is an important component of the analysis. In light of this, they are holding 2 public dialogue sessions in which community members and organizations can gather to participate in focus groups on the issue. The public input meeting will take place at the Champaign Public Library at 6 p.m. on this Wednesday, August 24th. This also includes making sure that pre-trial services are adequate. This appropriate measure was just announced this week.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. So just to fill people in a little bit further, the CRPC is a grant from the Department of Justice. So it's actually, that's a little bit problematic to begin with because the Department of Justice, the criminal justice system, is driving this. We know that the criminal justice system is self-perpetuating. So we know that they don't want to necessarily solve the problems of decarceration. But we're not going to say that they don't have any solutions. But in fact, there was another grant applied for through the MacArthur Foundation that we didn't get as a county. And that would have been a planning grant as well, but we actually didn't have enough focus on decarceration to get that grant. We got this one instead. So I'm not saying that it's bad, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of moving pieces with this. And I think I'm going to be at that meeting asking some questions of this group because I have some hard questions that they need to answer. Why should we wait 2 years to get a plan? And what is that plan going to look like? If they can come up with a plan, shouldn't it be funded in a new tax that we're levying as opposed to waiting on, okay, we're going to levy a tax. We're going to spend $19 million on a build out. And then you're going to tell us what your plan is? Well, I'm not sure about that. So, but as we said, there's many moving pieces here, and one of them is how else can we keep people out of jails? And so this is what Brian's going to talk to us about next, is a really good move that was announced just this week by I guess, the Obama administration. This is an NBC report that he's going to read.
So holding defendants in jail because they can't afford to make bail is unconstitutional, the Justice Department said in a court filing late Thursday. The first time the government has taken such a position before a federal appeals court. It's the latest step by the Obama administration in encouraging state courts to move away from imposing fixed cash bail amounts and jailing those who can't pay. Bail practices that incarcerate indigent individuals before trial solely because of their inability to pay for their release violate the 14th Amendment, the Justice Department said in a court filing or in a court brief citing the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection.
And just to say that's indigent, so it's people who have no money. So they're saying people who have no money cannot be held because they have no money. That's what they're saying there. So go ahead.
The filing came in the case of Maurice Walker of Calhoun, Georgia. He was kept in jail for 6 nights after police arrested him for the misdemeanor offense of being a pedestrian under the influence. He was told the court could not get out. He was told he could not get out of jail unless he paid the fixed bail amount of $160. So basically he was stuck in there until he could pay bail, but he didn't have the money to pay the bail.
Exactly.
So Justice Department civil rights lawyers said in their brief that the courts must consider a person's indigence and look at other ways of guaranteeing an appearance in court. Fixed bail schedules that allow for the pretrial release of only those who can play without accounting for those for the ability to pay. The government said this. Unlawfully discriminate based on indigence.
Right. So this is the deal. And this played out in, Florence? Is that Missouri.
Calhoun, Georgia.
Yeah, I'm recalling what was going. Do I have the town right where the Black Lives Matter movement basically started? Anyway, so you get fined because of this or that for public intoxication or this or that, and then you can't get out and you lose your job, and all of a sudden you have missed a court date then, and you have another fine stacking up, and this happens all too often. So what was basically declared unconstitutional more than, I think, back in the 1800s, they used to have actually debtor's prison, and then that was declared unconstitutional. You couldn't do that. Well, we still can't throw people in prison for owing Ameren, but we can throw people in prison for owing the governments. So you can have to stay in jail if you can't pay your fines, and your fines are for whatever they may be for, right? Well, the thing that Champaign County has not instituted, which could lead to some decarceration, is implementation of this law, for one, but pretrial services so that quickly people can be assessed right away. Are they a flight risk? And if they're not a flight risk, they don't have to go to jail at all. And most people who are poor are not flight risks. They can't go anywhere. They don't have any money. So, and most people who are arrested are poor. So this is one of the things that we're doing is we're filling prisons and jails with poor people. I heard a documentary this week that was from a guy who was wrongly convicted and spent 10 years in jail. From the time he was 19 to the time he was 29, he was in prison. And he then got out and has since become a lawyer. It was really excellent piece on the by the Cleveland group. I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, he had a really interesting quote, and he didn't make it up. He was told this, but by another lawyer. I would rather be rich and guilty than poor and innocent in the way our criminal justice system works. That's how poorly we treat poor people. There's so many people who are in there because they couldn't afford a decent lawyer. They don't have a decent public defender. So we could keep a lot of people out of prison if we would fund the public defender's office instead of the jail. When you think about that, get them a good public defender so that they can have what is their constitutional right, which is to have to be represented, right? We could have pretrial services. That's another way. There's many ways that we could decarcerate people. So we also need to remember, okay, it's 6:30. So yep, we're gonna keep plowing through here, but it is 6:30 to remind you that you are listening to CU Progressive News. What we're going to do is keep talking about this topic for about another 5 to 10 minutes, and then in at 20 till, we're going to go to Kristina Boerger talking about third-party elections. We're going to have a few announcements between then. So we also need to remember that we can probably eliminate needs for more beds in the county jail if we give people treatment options or not even arrest them for drug abuse. So a lot of people are addicts. They need treatment. We don't need to be treating basically a sickness as if it is a crime. Certainly, if there's no violence associated with it, we have no business arresting them whatsoever. When you think about it, all the rich people are on legal drugs. They're on drugs that are prescribed by their doctor, but other people self-medicate and get the drugs that they can afford. It's a huge thing. It's led to a big epidemic. People get hooked on Oxycontin, a legal drug, can't afford it anymore, turn to illegal drugs, can't get treatment. This is a huge epidemic. But we also remember from 2 weeks ago when we had Dan Lynn in, we talked about the new drug law in Illinois, which is for 10, I think it's 10 grams, is that right? That you are no longer, 10 grams of marijuana is now legal, decriminalized. I shouldn't say legal. It's not legal. You can still be fined for it. And then if you get fined and can't get out of jail because you're poor, exactly. You will stay in jail, right? Yeah. So that's the same kind of trap. It's like we'll still, so we're trying to fund much of the county services on the back of fining poor people, and then they can't get out of jail. It disrupts their whole life. So this is a complicated piece, but So already a small amount of marijuana has been decriminalized, but we have a state's attorney who also needs to send a message to all the police departments that she's not going to prosecute when she sees a drug case come across, unless it's a really heinous act associated with it. So, the Champaign County jail has to house whoever gets arrested, whether it's the Rantoul department, the Urbana, Mahomet, whoever, Champaign, whoever's arresting them, they have to stay in the Champaign County jail. That's a mandate. But if the state's attorney stops prosecuting all the people that are sent there, then the police departments will get the message, there's no point in me arresting this folk for this crime, which, could be, well, crime is just, people like to think that it's black and white, but there's so many ways that it's a decision by the police officer, by the state's attorney, by where you live, by where you happen, by, any number of circumstances that are always obviously used, that discriminatory choice is used against black people and against minorities, against poor people. So another moving piece in this whole big picture is the Champaign County Mental Health Board. I'm going to have you read about that, Brian.
The Champaign County Mental Health Board and Developmental Disabilities Board were created by referenda approved by the voters of Champaign County. Through the passage of the referendums, property tax levies were established to support the mission of the respective boards. Presently, these funds account for about $6 million of the property taxes collected by Champaign County. Each year, approximately 91% of the funds raised through the two levies are distributed using a competitive application process to community service agencies to assist Champaign County residents with developmental disabilities, mental health, and substance abuse treatment needs.
Okay, so we have $6 million of our property taxes that go each year to the Champaign County Mental Health Board. The Champaign County Mental Health Board and the Sheriff's Office last year brought someone from Texas, from Bexar County, Texas, his name was Leon Evans, here to help us initiate this thing called the Stepping Up Initiative, which is a model that really is about decarceration, jail diversion through mental health services, through addressing homelessness issues, and through just community services. That was a joint effort of the sheriff and the mental health board. There was task force that met for quite a while. I was part of that task force. It went by the wayside after 6 months or so of meetings. And there's really no reason that I can see that it went by the wayside, except for the fact that the sheriff was taking the lead instead of the mental health board, and the sheriff got the grant from the Department of Justice to work on that grant instead of continuing the work on the Stepping Up Initiative. I'm asking, why doesn't the Champaign County Mental Health Board pick up that piece of it? But it's complicated. Peter Tracy, the executive director of the Champaign County Mental Health Board, is retiring this year. And very shortly, they're going to be announcing who is going to be replacing him. Will they lead the board to have the will to create the mental health services that we need in Champaign County is something we really need to figure out who's on that board. And we need, as progressives, to make sure we attend those board meetings and lobby them so that they know that we want a detox center here. We want a crisis drop-off center, and we want mental health services that include homelessness, which is another thing I'll talk about in just a minute. We're going to have to wrap it up here. But we talked about the Stepping Up Initiative. So right now, homelessness ties into this because Rosecranse, who used to be Community Elements and who is administering this grant from the Department of Justice with the Sheriff's Office. So the Sheriff's Department and Community Elements are tight with this grant. They are the facilitators isn't the right word. Claudia Lenhoff is facilitating the meeting, but they are the ones who are receiving the biggest paycheck. So the grant money is really going to their employees who are attending these planning meetings. That's where the money is going. And Rosecrance / Community Elements has by far the largest number of people there. They've got a lot invested in it. I don't have a lot of confidence in Rosecranse / Community Elements. And one of the reasons why is historically I've seen how they have not been able to provide good services in terms of 6-week waiting lists. And when somebody loses their Medicaid, they don't have a decent sliding scale for people. And but most importantly and recently, they shut down the Time Center and Roundhouse, which is our men's shelter and our youth runaway shelter. And I consider those both community assets that we as a community have organized and funded for all these years. And now all of a sudden Rosecrance comes in, buys Community Elements, shuts those down. Are we really going to trust Community Elements to do anything except plan that DOJ grant? And the sheriff, we're going to trust the sheriff and the Department of and the Community Elements to provide us with a plan out of decarceration? That doesn't seem logical to me. The homeless shelter is a big issue that we'll have to cover another day, but I want to just say that at a meeting I was about homelessness last week, that was a coalition of people who are organizing about homelessness in this area, it was said unequivocally that the Time Center is not going to reopen as a men's drop-in center, as a bed-to-night kind of center. It does have a layer of services going for people who are in transition out of homelessness, but as far as a bed tonight, they're not going to offer that service. They're not thinking about it. They're not interested in it. They're not going to do it. Now, Rosecrance, their parent organization, has more history with substance abuse. So there is, I'm hoping, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed, that they are going to reopen the Time Center as a detox center. I don't know. It doesn't seem very likely because it doesn't really seem like it's set up like a medical detox center. But what are they going to do with it? It's really our asset. We looked as a community to figure out where we need a men's shelter. We have this one that operated out of McKinley Church for years. It was in the basement of their church. We figured out about the best location. Did a lot of work to get that center going, and now it's just off the board. Another moving piece is that there's a new Champaign County administrator. So that's the highest level of administration at the county. It's not an elected position. It's a paid-for position. His name is Rick Snyder. He's only been there a month or two. There's new board members coming on in the fall. You have to get involved, people, in your local county election boards. We have Peter Tracy, actually, from the Mental Health Board, is a Democrat who's running. And we'll be talking about the races in that. So you can see that there's just a lot of moving pieces. Throw one more at you. The Champaign County school referendum is going on the ballot this fall at the same time. So for them to think that that's not even all, that for them to think that both of those would pass, probably not. So they're not even really setting themselves up for this to pass, which is interesting. I don't hear a lot of support for it. I hear, that they voted for it, but what are they going to do to convince people to pass this sales tax? I do want to point out that we can't raise property taxes. There's a tax cap in Champaign County. So if we want more money for the county, which I actually do, I want it to go to services. I want it to go to the nursing home, which is another moving piece in this. They lumped this all together, facilities, sales tax, and the Champaign County Nursing Home is being basically pitted against people who are anti-jail are actually pro-nursing home, but they're both in the same referendum, which is not right, not fair, and not the way to do it if you really want the nursing home to get the money that they need. But there are other things that can be done to keep the nursing home afloat. And I know I'm out of time here, so I need to end because we're going to go over to Kristina Boerger for the last 19 minutes. We might not be able to hear the very end of that. Do you want to talk about an announcement that we have? Do we have something we need to say?
Yeah, so the Sanders campaign is moving on to the next phase. Please join the People's Campaign for Bernie's kickoff speech for Our Revolution. The event starts at 7:30 at the Channing Murray Foundation over on campus by Cranor. It's also called the Red Herring. The event will be co-sponsored by a lot of great organizations in town, including...
And that's Wednesday night, I think.
7:30.
7:30. Bernie talks at 8, so you have time to go to both meetings. The CRPC meeting at Champaign County Library at 6:30. All right, 6 o'clock to 7:30, and then fly on over to Channing Murray to go to the Sanders campaign. Don't forget that the CU Pride Festival is September 10th, and we heard that Dick Durbin is going to be the parade, whatever he is, marcher honor.
Great.
There you go. So now we're going to
to hear about third-party politics from I'll let myself on recording here do the introduction. Okay, we're speaking to Kristina Boerger, who is a singer, conductor, composer, professor of vocal ensemble music. She lives in Indiana currently, but she's formerly from Champaign-Urbana area and is the founder of Amasong, the premier Champaign-Urbana lesbian feminist chorus. Kristina, welcome to CU Progressive News.
Thank you.
You caught my eye on Facebook with a rant of sorts, but certainly an editorial that you wrote about your thoughts about third-party candidates with regard to the upcoming election. And I asked if you would come on the show to read it, so here we are, and I want you to just dive right into it.
Okay. I'll dive in, but I wanted less to be ranting than trying to find a way for third partiers and Hillary supporters to talk to one another. So
that's a good point. I shouldn't have used the term ranting because you took a long time to compose it, and that's what I really appreciated at it. That it actually wasn't a rant, but it was more a reasoned expression, and so we'll let the listeners decide.
Thank you. All right, well, here we go. Dear friends, this letter addresses a particular set of people. If the shoe fits, wear it and walk around in it a bit. If it doesn't fit, pass it along to someone whom it might fit. This letter is for you if the following all describe you. You have always voted only in the two-party, what I'll call the Republican system. You are supporting Hillary Clinton, and you are telling us alternative voters any or all of the following. Now is not the time to vote alternatives. The presidency is the wrong place to start with a third-party vote. Voting third-party is a callous exercise in privilege. The only thing a good and intelligent human can possibly consider doing is to defeat Trump by voting for Clinton. Our vote for an alternative candidate is a vote for Trump. We will be to blame if Trump wins, and there is no third choice. I'm not writing this to get into arguments with you. I don't want us shouting at one another. If I'm honest, I would say that it might not be until Election Day when I will be certain of the course I will take. I'm writing this because I would like you to consider some perspectives from our side that seem, by the tone and content of the above-cited arguments, to be going unrecognized. I would like to help you see things from this other perspective with at least as much clarity and respect as we see your motivation to vote for Hillary Clinton. I would like a new consideration of this blaming narrative. These possibilities being realized, there could perhaps be some movement where what we have had so far is a stalemate. Please, as you read or listen today, hear my tone of sorrow and compassion and earnest disclosure and questioning. Do not hear me shouting, because I'm in too much grief to be shouting. These, if you can open yourself to them, are some of the thoughts that we negotiate every day. We've been supporting alternative candidates for decades. We've been doing it because we've long ago concluded that the two-party system is anti-democratic and ethically bankrupt. We caught wind of its predations on humankind, followed up on those clues, learned what we would rather not have known about our government, and realized that even though many of us were still getting by just fine with the status quo, legions of others in our country and abroad were getting the shaft, and that this system, if allowed to continue, would only chew up more and more people and more earth in its wake. Most relevantly, we predicted that continued support for this system would lead us to precisely the political moment we are seeing today. Please let me say that again. Most relevantly, we predicted that continued support for this system would lead us to precisely the political, economic, environmental moment we are seeing today. The thing that the rest of you are most fearing today is a Trump presidency. Well, the reason we all have Trump to fear is that the very system you have all been supporting is the system that is content to put him before the American people in a contest that he might win. And the reason he might win is that he has figured out how to exploit the fears and resentments that plague critical numbers of American voters who have been shafted by this same system. Throughout our voting lives, as we have supported alternative candidates, we have been constantly barraged with the messages that now is not the time. The stakes are too high. Help us get out of this emergency, and then we can talk about alternatives. And everyone who caved into that pressure ended up perpetuating the system that reproduces the emergency to ever-mounting tolls. And how many of you who pressured us, professing to believe that our convictions were right and only our timing was bad, actually went on afterwards to cultivate alternative options for the voting citizenry? If that election 28 years ago was not the time, and that election 24 years ago was not the time, etc., then when is the time? If we wait for your nod, there will not be a time, because this system has not reversed any of the political, economic, or environmental trends it created that constitute this emergency. These trends continue down their rotten trajectories. Believe me, we fully understand your terror. We feel every day your temptation to vote for Clinton, and I'm not swearing today that I won't do it in the end. I don't think you're stupid, and I don't think you're unprincipled. I merely suspect you may be wrong. But the flip side is that I know it's possible I could be wrong, and I'm trying earnestly to sort it out. But it would help if, instead of screaming at us as if we are stupid or unprincipled, you who have always supported this rotten system and are desperate for us to join you would just acknowledge out loud, we all have this rotten system because critical numbers ask for it again and again when there have, in fact, been other options. And you are a part of those critical numbers. Say out loud to us that you are among the citizens who have given this rotten system the go-ahead time and again. Say out loud that the system you have chosen time and again is the one that has got you so scared. Now you're desperate for us to help you limit the damage of the choices you have made. Couldn't you, who never voted with us when we urged you to, now beg us with some humility instead of haranguing and insulting us? And admit it to us if you haven't done anything since the last time, and the time before that, and the time before that, to help cultivate third options. Admit it if you wish other people had done so that you might feel it was viable for you to vote alternatives. Alarmingly, the now is not the time argument may by now have had the effect of producing a situation in which we will die before the time comes. At the very least, please try to imagine how the now is not the time refrain falls on our ears who hear it every 4 years, and without, for the most part, seeing you help us bring about the day when it could be, according to you, the time. To those of you who are circulating the message that the presidential election is not the place to start with support of non-Republican candidates, please know that we are not starting. Perhaps you, for the first time in your voting life, started during this presidential election season to consider an alternative candidate. But we have been supporting alternative candidates for decades, and not just for the office of president. And by supporting, I don't mean merely voting. I mean also, for example, donating money every month to support alternative candidates. I mean writing and speaking on a near daily basis to help others see that we have other choices and that our current system is rotten. To the charge that supporting a third-party candidate is a callous exercise in privilege, I would counter, one could at least as easily make the case to you, if you are yourself privileged, as most people leveling this accusation at us have been, we could at least as easily make the case to you that your vote for the status quo has always been a callous exercise in privilege. I mean, how else would you be privileged except that this system made you so? That's the definition of privilege. A set of unearned advantages conferred upon you by a system that also unfairly withholds those advantages from others. Listen, this system has ravaged the people on the bottom, and the numbers in that ravaged class are ballooning. When I began supporting alternative candidates so many years ago, it still looked as though the status quo would continue to benefit and protect the people of my class. I had no fear for my own fortunes, And a vote for the Republicrats would have seemed logical as a vote to protect my own privilege. But I was consumed with trouble over the ravaged, and it was because of them that I began to raise the alarm. I wanted a system that would distribute more evenly the benefits of citizenship, and that would mean my in-group and I would have less, so that people in greater need could have more. It was tough, though, to convince the comfortable to vote these socialist kinds of principles with me. As I see it, it is most critically the votes of the privileged, those content with the status quo, that have kept our present system ensconced. Maybe that observation applies to you. In fact, we can't account for the myriad motivations of the multiplicity and diversity of votes for or against the current system. The whole question is open to examination. I would like to say that in addition to being inaccurate and unprovable, it is hitting far, far below the belt to hurl at us the accusation of callous privilege. So far, no one who has said that to me is speaking from the bottom, most ravaged sectors of our economy. But I do know about several voting strategies that people in those sectors are pursuing, and supporting the current system is only one of them. I know people living and working with those in our most perpetually exploited classes who have concluded, along with their impoverished neighbors, that no choice currently before us will make a material difference in the quality of life in those neighborhoods. Masses of those people are simply not voting, or they are cultivating the political futures of activists you haven't even heard of yet. They would say to you that your Republican vote is a callous exercise in privilege. To the idea that we must defeat Trump by voting for Hillary, I ask, why not defeat Trump by voting for someone who polls more strongly against him, or for someone whose ideas are so much more beneficial to life? And I ask, how does a Clinton presidency vanquish Trump? It seems to me that a Clinton presidency recapitulates the system that produced the phenomenon of Trump's populist movement, which will not simply go away mollified if Clinton wins. A Clinton presidency only locks us into the next round in this downward spiral. That conclusion is not a stupid one to draw, and it's not an unprincipled one to draw. It is not stupid or unprincipled to question the assumption that repeating the same national voting behaviors will take us to a different place from where it has brought us thus far. Our vote for an alternative candidate will be a vote for that alternative candidate. Votes for Trump are votes for Trump. Votes for Clinton are votes for Clinton. Each voter is responsible exactly for the vote that she or he cast, and not for the votes anyone else cast or didn't cast. In the end, if Clinton loses, despite all your votes, despite all the support the current system throws behind her while obstructing other contenders, then you will have voted for a loser. Why will that have been anyone else's fault? Why do you think it is more incumbent on us to vote for your loser than it is for you to vote for our loser? If your answer is, I'm not going to vote for your loser because your loser won't get enough votes, that is an argument about as circular as, I believe the Bible is true because it says it is. If Trump wins, it will have been the fault of everyone who voted for him, which motivation has not been produced by the voting behaviors of us alternative voters. And it will have been the outcome of a system that exists because there haven't been enough people demanding a different one along with us. The historical tsunami producing the Trump threat is long and huge, with a momentum behind it that is far more than I can turn back by voting for Hillary Clinton, or even than her winning the presidency will turn back rather than further provoke. To reverse that tsunami requires large numbers of people reversing themselves to do something different. It benefits nothing for the few of us who have always been on the fringes to suddenly play along with what is already always happening. We would like you to stop scapegoating us for this nation's emergencies. We are not, alas, as powerful as all that. Look to your systems. There are other choices, but ironically, it's your chorus of, that's impossible, that makes so many people feel there is no choice. Singing that song manifests that reality. I am not singing it. I am singing the song of desperation to keep other options alive until the day when enough of you decide to choose them. The difference between us is not that one side is smarter or more principled. It's a difference in how we diagnose a medical emergency and how we prescribe the treatment. My analogy would be this. We have an illness that under current treatment protocols is terminal. The current protocols give us two choices. These choices are costly to us and lucrative for their providers. Number one, carve off successive body parts until we die of the illness and its treatment. Number two, ingest debilitating poisons to create respites that will be followed by stronger rebounds of the illness until we die of it and its treatment. One of these takes a little longer to kill us than the other one. A third option, one that would starve the interests benefiting from the entrenched protocols, would involve a systemic cure effected by a radically new approach, say, for the sake of the analogy, stem cell therapy, naturopathic detoxification. But the economic, political, and cultural barriers to accessing that alternative cure are formidable, and these include scapegoating the proponents of the radical cure for the ravages of the illness. We have to get pretty sick from the standard protocols before we will take the risk to demand the alternative new option. Then again, at some point we are too sick to muster the energy and resources to demand the third option. Where are we as a nation in that scenario? In other words, if now is not the time, does that mean that it will be the time very soon? Or has the time already passed? That critical window may be terribly narrow. Right now, I think we are struggling with one another because we aren't all hitting that narrow and critical window at the same time. We've all got different types and amounts of reserves. Not until Election Day will I know whether I'm ready to say, I'm going to die tomorrow, but I'm leaving all my assets to the radical researchers, or go ahead and chop off my jaw. I'd rather die jawless next month than eating artichokes tomorrow. Of course, if you don't see the disease as terminal or its treatments as ravaging failures, in other words, if you don't agree with me that the system is rotten, then we don't have much shared basis for the more mutually understanding and compassionate exchange I am trying to promote between us. And P.S., you may be too privileged to accuse others of acting out of privilege. I wrote this in hopes that we have more common ground than that, and to suggest ways your approach to the conversation might shift if what you really want is to bring us more into alignment, instead of silencing me and others of my perspectives. One final word. The smartest political thinkers and the most tireless activists I know have always reminded me that in every struggle, progress has always depended on the commitment of individuals along various points in the spectrum of options. Could it not be that the place you occupy today and the place I occupy today are both essential to our moving in the direction of the good? Could it not be that you are in your right place and I am in mine? Peace and justice, Kristina.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening to tonight's edition of CU Progressive News. This show is produced live in studio at WEFT, WEFT 90.1 FM. We're in downtown Champaign. And isn't Sandra just like an encyclopedia of information? Really cool listening to her. Hey, do us a favor, share this show with your friends, share it on Facebook. Let's get the word out there about progressive issues. Thanks again for listening.